Ready for another deep dive? We're going to be looking at the Philippines today,
Okay.
based on this YouTube video you sent over.
Right.
It's a pretty intense situation over there.
Yeah, it really is. It's fascinating, though.
Yeah,
Like
it's
all these moving parts and all these different interests,
right.
and just the history alone in the region is so complex.
Yeah, so we've got the Philippines and their relationship with the U.S. and China,
Right.
and this potential return of U.S. troops.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's a very, very delicate situation.
It's like they're walking a tightrope,
Yeah,
between these two superpowers,
right.
trying to find that balance where they can protect their own interests.
Exactly.
Without,
Getting pulled in one direction or the other.
yeah, exactly, without upsetting one side or the other.
Okay, so let's break this down.
Okay.
We've all heard about the South China Sea dispute.
Right.
It's been in the news for years.
Mm-hmm.
But this video really brings it home, like
Yeah.
how dangerous things are actually getting out there.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one thing to read about it in the news.
Right.
But to actually see, footage of some of these incidents,
Yeah,
it really, drives home the point
absolutely.
that things could escalate very quickly.
So just to recap for people who may not be totally up to speed,
Sure.
China's been claiming huge areas of the South China Sea,
Yeah, vast areas.
which includes waters that the Philippines considers their own exclusive economic zone.
Exactly what they call the West Philippine Sea.
Right, and that's the area where a country has all those special rights.
Mm-hmm. For things like fishing and natural resources.
Exactly, and China's been, actively trying to enforce their claim.
Right. They've been pretty aggressive about it.
Yeah, so, there was that incident recently where...
Forgot the laser?
Yeah, a Chinese Coast Guard vessel actually fired a military-grade laser...
Yeah, it was crazy.
at a Filipino ship.
I mean, blinding the crew temporarily.
It's scary stuff.
It's incredibly reckless and dangerous.
It even said in the video, it's like a big truck cutting off a small car.
It's that kind of dynamic,
Yeah.
a huge power imbalance.
Yeah, it's frightening to see.
And, it's not just this one incident.
Right.
There have been so many close calls, near misses, even collisions,
Yeah.
stemming from these aggressive maneuvers by Chinese vessels.
And the Philippines has filed tons of complaints, right?
Yeah, almost 200 diplomatic complaints.
Wow.
But it doesn't seem to be deterring China's actions.
Yeah, so amidst all of this tension, the Philippines is also trying to strengthen ties with the U.S.
Right, sort of like a counterbalance.
Yeah, they've got this agreement
Uh-huh.
called the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, or EDCA.
Yeah, EDCA.
Can you explain that a little?
Sure. So basically, EDCA allows for the rotation of U.S. troops in Philippine bases.
Okay,
So it's not a permanent presence.
got it.
They come and go.
So more of a we're here to help if you need us kind of deal.
Exactly. It's a very different situation than in the past,
Right.
when the U.S. actually had full control over large military installations.
Yeah, so it's more of a partnership.
Exactly. And the bases themselves remain under Philippine control.
Okay, and the video mentioned that this agreement is expanding.
Yeah, that's right.
Going from 5 bases to 9.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these new locations seem strategically significant.
Well, they are for sure.
Like Palawan
Right.
and Cagayan.
Yeah.
Palawan is so close to all those disputed areas of the South China Sea.
It's right there in the thick of it.
Yeah, and then Cagayan is the closest Philippine province to Taiwan.
Exactly.
So you can see why these locations are raising eyebrows.
I mean, it puts the Philippines right at the heart of this potential U.S.-China conflict.
Right, at the center of it.
Yeah, and that's a very dangerous position to be in.
Yeah, and of course, all of this is happening while China is increasing their economic influence in the region.
Right. You can't separate those two things.
No, you can't.
The economics and the security are all intertwined.
They use the example of the Apari port in the video.
Yeah, up in Cagayan.
Uh-huh.
That's a really crucial port, but it needs a lot of work, a lot of upgrades.
And China has offered to fund the rehabilitation,
Yeah, they've stepped in and said, hey, we'll help you with this.
which puts the governor of Cagayan in a really tough spot.
Oh, absolutely.
He wants to reopen this port for trade.
Especially with China.
Right, but if he allows U.S. troops to be stationed in Cagayan,
Right,
will China pull their funding?
right. That's the big question.
And could that hurt the region's economic development?
Exactly. It's a real dilemma for him.
Yeah, on one hand, there's this potential economic boost from China,
Mm-hmm.
but then on the other hand, there's this risk of becoming too reliant on China.
Right, and potentially alienating the U.S.
So it's classic geopolitics.
Yeah, a classic balancing act.
And his decision could have huge consequences.
Either way,
Yeah.
it's a tough one.
And all of this must be super sensitive for Filipinos, given their history with the U.S.
Oh, yeah. Brings up a lot of baggage for people.
The video even goes into that.
Yeah, it's important to remember that history.
Right. The U.S. colonization of the Philippines. Right.
And then the presence of those major U.S. bases during the Korean and Vietnam Wars.
Yeah, huge bases like Subic Bay and Clark Airfield.
And those bases brought a lot of economic activity, right?
Yeah, especially in areas like Olongapo City.
But they also brought social problems.
Right.
Mm.
There was a darker side to it as well.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Well, for example, there's a huge rise in the sex industry.
Oh, right.
Around the bases.
Mm.
They actually share the story of this woman, Alma Bulawan, in the video, and she was pressured into sex work.
Wow.
As a young waitress in Olongapo.
That's heartbreaking.
It really is, and it just highlights the exploitation and the lasting impact that this industry had on many women's lives.
And then there's the issue of the Americans.
Right. The children fathered by American soldiers.
Who often faced stigma.
Yeah, and were left behind in poverty when the base is closed.
It's just a reminder of this really complex legacy.
Yeah, it's not a simple story.
Of the U.S. military presence in the Philippines.
Definitely not black and white. And it fuels a lot of anxieties.
Understandably so.
About the U.S. troops returning.
Yeah, it's not just about geopolitics, you know. There are these deeply personal and emotional aspects to it for many Filipinos.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff for sure.
It really is, and we're going to explore some more of those human stories in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we'll delve a little deeper into that aspect of it.
All right, let's take a break.
Sounds good.
And then there's the whole legal side of things too, right?
Yeah, that adds another layer of complexity.
This visiting forces agreement.
All right, the VFA.
That kind of dictates how all of this works, right?
Yeah, it's the agreement that lays out the legal framework for U.S. troops in the Philippines.
And the video highlights these two really controversial cases.
Yeah, those were huge.
That really tested this agreement.
Definitely.
The rape case of Suzette Nicholas.
Right.
That involved U.S. Lance Corporal Daniel Smith. And then the killing of Jennifer Loud.
Tragic.
A transgender woman by U.S. serviceman Joseph Scott Pemberton.
Yeah, it sparked a lot of outrage.
Both of these cases did.
Especially because in both cases, the U.S. invoked the VFA.
Right, to keep custody.
To retain custody of the accused. Yeah.
And that really rubbed a lot of Filipinos raw.
Oh, absolutely. They saw it as a huge infringement on their sovereignty.
Right.
Like a lack of respect for their legal system.
Yeah, and it really fueled that anti-American sentiment.
Yeah, and raised these questions about whether U.S. troops could really be held accountable for their actions in the Philippines.
So what actually happened in these cases?
So both service members were convicted.
Okay.
But the outcomes just made things worse, basically.
They just added fuel to the fire.
Yeah, Smith was actually acquitted.
Wow.
And Pemberton was later pardoned by President Duterte.
So that must have been devastating for the victims' families.
Absolutely. And for everyone who was pushing for justice?
Yeah, it must have felt like a slap in the face.
Yeah, like the perception was that the U.S. was protecting their own, regardless of the crimes committed.
Yeah, so it just further eroded trust.
Yeah, in the VFA.
And this idea that it's really more beneficial to the U.S. than the Philippines.
Right, that's not really a fair agreement.
Okay, so we've got this long history. We've got this legal baggage.
Yeah.
And then things get even more interesting when you bring in President Duterte.
Right, he really shook things up.
He did.
Yeah, he took this dramatic turn away from the U.S. and towards China.
Yeah, he was very openly critical of the U.S.
He was.
And he saw those closer ties with China as crucial.
Especially for the Philippines' economic future.
But even he couldn't ignore the South China Sea dispute entirely, could he?
No, it was just too big of an issue.
But he really tried to downplay it, right?
But he did. Yeah, he tried to appease China.
But it doesn't seem like it really worked out.
Not really. China continued its aggressive actions in the South China Sea.
So it was like a wake-up call in a way?
I think it was for a lot of people in the Philippines.
Yeah, that appeasing China wasn't going to work.
Yeah, they realized that China's ambitions in the South China Sea weren't going to be curbed.
Right, just by being friendly.
Yeah, it led to a real rethinking of their foreign policy priorities.
And now with President Marcos Jr., we're seeing this like pendulum swing back.
It is.
Towards the U.S.
Right back to that closer relationship with the U.S.
Expanding EDCA, those big joint military exercises.
Yeah, it's a clear signal that the Philippines is leaning back on the U.S.
But that must come with its own set of worries.
Oh, it does. I mean, the Philippines is very aware of this rivalry between the U.S. and China.
Right.
And some people are definitely worried that By strengthening those ties with the U.S.,
Mm-hmm.
they risk becoming collateral damage.
If things escalate.
Yeah, it's like they're caught between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, it's not an easy position to be in.
Not at all. They're trying to chart their own course,
Right.
assert their sovereignty,
Mm-hmm.
maintain their independence.
It's a tough balancing act.
Yeah, and the video really does a good job
Uh-huh.
of laying out these different perspectives within the Philippines.
Right.
You know, you have those who see the U.S. as this necessary counterweight.
Right, to China's aggression.
Yeah, they look to the U.S. for security guarantees.
Right.
For military aid.
And there's a lot of goodwill towards the U.S. too, right?
Yeah, based on those historical ties and shared values.
But then you also have Filipinos who are very wary.
Right. They're like,
Yeah.
hold on, we don't want to be drawn into a war that's not ours to fight.
Exactly. And they're concerned about all those potential problems.
Right, that might return with a larger U.S. military presence.
And then some people even see this as a step backwards.
Yeah, like compromising their independence.
So it's really complex.
It is. It's a very nuanced situation.
Yeah. What stood out to you the most from all of this?
Well, there was this one interview that really stuck with me.
Okay.
The person said, it's not about picking sides. It's about ensuring the Philippines remains a truly sovereign nation.
Wow.
And I think that really sums it up.
Yeah.
The Philippines is searching for that balance, a way to navigate these really powerful external forces while safeguarding their own interests and their autonomy.
Yeah. It's a tough situation for sure.
Oh yeah, tons of tough choices ahead for the Philippines.
So after diving into all of this, what stood out to you the most?
I think what really got me was the resilience of the Filipino people.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been through so much.
Right. Colonization, war, natural disasters.
Economic hardship, you name it.
And yet they're still striving for a better future.
Yeah, and doing it all while dealing with these crazy geopolitical pressures.
It's remarkable.
It really is.
Their history is a testament to their strength.
For sure.
And determination.
Absolutely. And I think it also highlights something else.
What's that?
The human cost of these global power struggles.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in all the high-level analysis, you know, geopolitics and all that.
Yeah.
But we can't forget that real people's lives are deeply affected by these decisions.
Like Alma Bulawan.
Yeah, exactly.
Her story really brought that home.
Yeah, she was just trying to make a living.
Right.
And she ended up caught in the undertow of all these larger forces.
And it's not just her.
Right.
The Americans, too.
Yeah, their stories are powerful reminders.
That this isn't just some abstract game.
Exactly. These are real human consequences.
But even amidst all that hardship,
Yeah.
there are these little glimmers of hope.
There are.
Like how Alma finally connected with her son's father.
Oh, yeah, after all those years.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it speaks to that enduring power of human connection, you know?
Right, even across all those divides.
Yeah, history, circumstance.
So where do you think this all leads?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah, what's the future for the Philippines as they try to navigate all of this?
Well, I think they're at a crossroads.
Yeah.
And they've got some really tough choices to make.
Like what direction do they go in?
Exactly. And the path they choose will have a huge impact.
Oh, yeah.
Not just for them,
Right.
but for the whole region.
They've got to weigh those potential benefits of closer ties with the U.S.
Right, things like security guarantees, economic aid.
Against the risk of getting caught in a conflict that's not theirs.
Yeah, and they can't just ignore China either.
Right.
I mean, China's economic influence is huge.
It's everywhere.
And the Philippines has to find a way to engage with them.
Right.
Without, you know, giving up their sovereignty.
Right.
Or becoming too reliant.
No easy answers.
No easy answers at all.
No, but it seems like one thing's for sure.
What's
The
that?
Philippines wants to control its own destiny.
Yeah, they don't want to be a pawn in someone else's game.
Exactly.
They want to be a truly independent nation.
Right, making their own choices.
Yeah, charting their own course.
Decisions that benefit their people.
That's the goal.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive.
It has.
It's a story of resilience, tough choices.
And the search for sovereignty.
What are you left thinking about?
I keep coming back to that image, you know, of the Philippines walking this tightrope.
Between the U.S. and China.
Yeah. Can they really maintain that balance?
Right.
A balance that truly serves their interests?
Or will they eventually have to pick a side?
That's the big question.
No easy answers.
No, none at all.
It's a question that'll shape the future of the Philippines.
And the whole region.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this.
Yeah. What resonated with you?
Reach out and let us know.
Yeah. And who knows?
Maybe this will be the start of another deep dive.
Into this fascinating topic.
Sounds good.